Between the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean, at a point where the Gulf of Suez meets the Gulf of Aqaba, lies the Red Sea, one of the 8 great diving locations in the world. At the southern end of Sinai is Sharm el-Sheik, the essential jumping-off point for the divers who come from all over the world to discover the 30 or so diving sites scattered around the area. Here, the seabed may reach a depth of 3,000 meters, and the surface temperature of the water averages about 30 degrees centigrade. The result is a proliferation of coral reefs, which attracts thousands of species of fish, 10% of which are only found in this region. Sharm el-Maya is the port of Sharm el-Sheik, where the flotilla of small boats which daily carry the divers to the various diving locations are moored. Stretching around the bay, the town itself is at the center of a 45-mile-long coral reef, which is considered to be one of the richest in the world. For several years it has continued to grow under the stony gaze of John Kennedy. Here it is that twice a day the real heart of the town beats. The nearest diving sites are only a few hundred yards from the harbour entrance. The most notable, Temple, Rasum Sid. The promontory of Rasum Sid favours the development of gorgions, producing a veritable underwater forest. The beaches nearby provide 5 easy access points to the coral waters, which are only about 15 meters deep. The Cape is traditionally the place of familiarization, where divers get their first view of the flora and fauna of the Red Sea. However, care must be taken, for the shimmering feathery aerial sails of the lionfish conceal small, sharp, poison-filled spines, which can be quite painful if touched. Nothing to fear, however, from this blue escort of fusiliers, accustomed as they are to the divers' visits. But the Red Sea is above all a kingdom of colours. Those of the butterfly fish, the brilliant red of a goggle eye, or the flight of angelfish. Present on most of the reefs, the anthias with its variable crest. At times of planktonic explosion, the salps adorn the blue depths with their fairy lights. Accessible by foot from the coast or the beaches, the diving sites of Rasum Sid are frequently visited by divers, including those who dive at night. Moving northwards towards the Isles of Tiran, the marine part of the mountain chain running from the peaks of Saudi Arabia to the summits of Sinai. The centre of the Gulf of Aqaba reaches a depth of 1,000 meters. However, the straits themselves are no more than 250 meters deep, and the diving sites are very popular. The most well-known are Gordon Reef and Jackson Reef. Here the reef plunges to a depth of 25 meters. It is a remarkable place where the deep waters of the continental shelf merge with those of the straits, forming a bottleneck through which the current drags the plankton, the coral organisms and the fish, all vital links in the marine food chain. The tubar, an enemy fish, with others, play with the currents carrying their food. The fleeting flight of a turtle, which in spite of being protected in this part of the Red Sea, is still in danger of extinction. At the southern extremity of the Tiran archipelago, less than a mile from the shore, lies Gordon Reef. Here the lighthouse warns of the dangers, but it did not prevent the Lulilla from running aground here on the 29th of September 1981. Until its eventual destruction by the waters of the Red Sea, it will remain as an integral part of the scenery. Here the base of the reef is at a depth of 30 meters and the currents are sometimes strong. But sheltered here, the underwater life seems calm and peaceful, and the divers can observe the inhabitants at their leisure. Facing the reefs on the coast is Ras Nasrani. The diving site is situated on a quite narrow coral sandbank, which is easily accessible from the road. Throughout the whole park, boats are anchored to prevent the destruction of the coral. 4 boats per anchorage, and their surveillance is strict. The result is the magical spectacle all around. Deep down, in between sand and coral, the divers have need of a light to illuminate the markings of an anthias, or those of an angelfish. Shark Bay, a village linked to the beginning of diving in this region, at a time before the towns had risen from the sand and where facilities were less than basic, remains today a place appreciated for its natural beauty. In a short time in this tropical sea nearest to Europe, towns grow and expand at the same rate as the area's success. Thus, Sheik Coast is fast becoming one of the large towns of South Sinai. Here, as everywhere, protection of the environment can be seen. The swimming pools on cushions of air give access to the sea without trampling the precious coral on the shore. And for freshwater lovers, there's a place above. At the edge of the town, the desert reclaims its rights, a vast expanse of sand and rock, shared in the south between 8 Bedouin tribes which account for 3,000 of the 70,000 Sinai Bedouins. Ancient nomads of the Arabian Peninsula arrived in Sinai almost 5,000 years ago. Even when they are settled, they still retain their age-old customs and their tents. The camel and the black goats are the basics of the Bedouin existence. Many of them enter the ranks of the rangers who maintain the national park, thus participating in the protection of their own environment. A fitting role for a people who claim a tree which dies is a soul flying away. But tourism is never far away, and motorized transport sometimes replaces the camel. Nama Bay, a mile and a half from Sheik Coast and 3.5 miles from the port, is one of the main tourist centres of the region. Around a magnificent bay bordered with beaches, the hotels have been built facing the sea, providing alternative activities for those who may not wish to dive.
Here come the hot stay back. I'm the lyrical gangster. You got the queen of the area. Love it like that. Here come the hot stay back. I'm the lyrical gangster. You got the queen of the area. Love it like that.
On one side, those who are learning to dive, and on the other side, those who prefer to watch without getting wet.
Okay, now let's go to another place, different something else. Adesso andiamo a vedere altro corallo differenza, cambiare.
The appearance of the desert moon signals the change from beach to street.
A nord, la costa mediterranea. I beduini accorrono per rifugiarsi durante la cattiva stagione. Scompare in una nuvola di pesciolini.
Sharm el-Sheikh also affords the opportunity of discovering, only a few miles away in the heart of the mountains, a number of historical sites which should not be missed. In a place sacred to Islam, Judaism and Christianity stands the monastery of St. Catherine, which has been home to scores of monks since the 6th century. A 3-hour walk from the monastery brings you to Mount Sinai, and beside it, Mount St. Catherine, which at a height of 2,637 meters is the highest summit in Sinai. Another interesting site in the Sharm el-Sheikh region is the spectacular colored canyon at Nuweiba. Then there is Dahab, where the mountains drop sheerly to the sea. Near to the beach, built on a lagoon, is the picturesque Bedouin village of Asala. It is here that we find the famous blue hole, known to divers all over the world. On the other side of the peninsula, the boat heads towards the large Sharm Ali Reef. Here in 1941, German bombers sunk a 400-foot-long British ship. The wreck was found in 1956 by a team under the command of Captain Costo. This is the famous Thistlegorm, which lies at a depth of between 17 and 30 meters. The approach is delicate. There are many boats in the vicinity. It's a question of positioning the boat in such a way that the divers do not have to swim too long in the strong currents. It is for this reason that the boat moors itself to the superstructure of the sunken vessel.
حل خلاص حل. Now it's 2 ropes, one on the right and one on the left. So because I said 2 ropes because the boat is not moving to right and to the left. So there is no current. There is a little bit current. Okay. We go down on the anchor line on the front. Okay. With your camera, with your equipment. Yeah. And if you would like to go to this way or this way, it's up to you. All right. Where is the car? The car here is 2 holes. The tank. And the first hole and the second hole is motorbikes and tracks and everything.
Motorbikes and tanks are among the things still contained in the holds of the ship, which was carrying supplies for the British Army. The surrealist cargo is made up of jeeps, 4 railway carriages, motor cars, tractors, as well as arms and ammunition. However, the visit would not be complete if we ignored the inhabitants of this place. The Red Sea fish are drawn here by the plankton-bearing currents, which provide them with a rare feast. In this strange place, what one at first takes to be a caterpillar turns out to be a fish, a flathead, which could find no better place than this to hide itself. We are now on the western side of the Ras Mohammed National Park, at the southern tip of the Sinai, where the Gulf of Suez meets the Gulf of Aqaba. A place not to be missed, alternatives, a group of 25 coral reefs in an area where the landscape seems intent upon imitating the splendors of the deep. One of the coral reefs is called Stingray Station, even though there are no longer very many of this type of ray to be found in the area. However, as if in compensation, there is at a depth of 18 meters the most fabulous coral garden in the whole region. Coral necklace for this timid creature, which has found a refuge and a hiding place here. Clear passage for an adult emperor angel fish, whose colors change dramatically with age. A blue-green damselfish against the vivid coral colors of this underwater flower bed, which is stingray. The Bride of the Sea, with a map of Africa on its side. Still at alternatives, by 2 of the immense perforated coral reefs which characterize this place, we tie up the boat. This is a favored place for safaris, an outing of several days on board a comfortable boat. The program not only includes exploration by day, but also night diving on the sandy seabed, where it's easier to find the nocturnal life. Life on board is planned and diving gives way to eating. During the meal, they talk about the great moments of the day.
Some glass fish and some small orange one fish.
For their part, the crew takes advantage of this moment to relax a while. Diving begins again, a few hundred yards from the gates of Ras Mohammed National Park. Alternatives takes its name from the alternatives it offers divers in the case of bad weather. They are always certain to find possible dives. Why not under the gaze of a goby fish? A meeting with the grouper, somewhat annoyed for having been disturbed from its siesta. This scene does not at all discourage Malvina, one of the few painters who makes a living from her underwater work. After careful preparation and with the right equipment, all that remains is to find a suitable subject. Today, it's a tree of coral. Interrupted for a moment by the painter, the ballet recommences. One, two squirrelfish. Sergeant Major fish. A strange niche for two masked butterfly fish. This is the tree which has inspired Malvina. We will see it again once she has finished sketching it. Night at the same place. the proportions seem to have changed, and the inhabitants are no longer the same. In a cloud of plankton, 3 lionfish, who show a preference for the twilight or the night, perform the ballet of the hungry diners. Spotted reef stingray, another nocturnal creature, combs the sand of the seabed in search of food. A cube trunkfish, whose tail fins serve as a rudder. Even the shellfish are insomniacs. On camera, this hermit crab scurries away to find peace and quiet. Waking up with a start, this Foxall's goatfish has difficulty recovering its senses. On the sand of the seabed, many fish use camouflage to escape their predators. Although not on form tonight, the Spanish dancer is renowned for the grace of its movements as it performs its underwater dance. A few minutes away from alternatives, towards the middle of the Gulf of Suez, is Beacon Rock, another point of attraction for visitors to the Red Sea. Near the beacon, the wreck of the English steamship the Dunraven has lain since 1876, its bow at a depth of 18 meters and its stern at a depth of 28 meters. The propeller of this wooden ship is a landmark known to all divers. Head due south. Here the structure of the reef has become favourable to the creation of a luxuriant underwater environment at a place which is unique. It is the diving sites at the foot of Ras Mohammed, Yolanda Reef and Shark Reef. These cliffs are blocks of fossilized coral, attached to the mainland by a thin strip of land. In front, two outcrops indicate the diving sites. Yolanda Reef, named in remembrance of a Cypriot freighter which ran aground there in 1981, and Shark Reef, recalling the sharks which previously abounded in these waters. Beside them, Anemone City, an underwater plateau at a depth of between 20 and 28 meters. The coral table is just below the surface, a few meters away from a vertical wall which plunges straight down to depths of up to 70 meters. One of the great predators of the coral reef, the snappers, who usually live alone, band together in groups during the spawning season. This strange fish with its broom-like tail is also an inhabitant of the open water near the reef. Strange mimicry of this resting octopus. Beside a blue triggerfish. Some trevally. A spotted ray. A moray. Those of the Red Sea can reach 8 feet in length. By day they rarely leave their lair, but despite their reputation, these large solitary creatures are not really aggressive. However, if they are provoked or sense themselves in danger, they will bite, and the resulting deep gash does not heal easily. The single horn characterizes the spotted unicorn fish, one of the surgeonfish family. Scorpionfish, not to be confused with the stonefish, also camouflages itself among the rocks. The celebrity of the tropical oceans is the Napoleon fish. Its friendliness and expressive gaze is what has made it the favorite of the divers. Several trevally, in search of food, attempt an incursion into a shoal of snappers, but no doubt, influenced by the large numbers, pass on. Always a little comical with its large head and moving eyes, the triggerfish scours the sand in search of food. But take care, for it can attack if threatened, showing its strong teeth and even biting the invading diver. A few feet from the coral table, silhouetted against the vast blue expanse, are the great privileged inhabitants of this place, the sharks, especially the grey reef shark. Endangered species, the green turtle, whose main enemy is man, who hunts them for their shells. Then, an exceptional and thrilling sight, the manta ray in full aquatic flight. Incomparable grace for creatures whose wingspan can reach up to 20 feet. Accompanied by its cleaner, the fingerfish is one of those rare species of fish whose gills allows them to breathe both in salt water and in the brackish water where they are born. At Ras Mohammed, very near to the diving sites, is a mangrove swamp which serves their needs. The reefs just above the surface of the water enable swimmers equipped only with basic masks to view the underwater spectacle too. Another unique place, Eel Garden. It is the only fault in the unbroken vertical wall which extends from Ras Sa'atir to Ras Mohammed. A track carved by a now dried up river allows the divers to drive to the spot. And here is the attraction, a colony of sand eels. Half out of their holes to seize their food, they gracefully dance in the moving currents. A few hundred yards away is Marsa Bareka, one of the best protected marine sites. Here access is prohibited without special authorization. However, a few of its beaches are open to the public. The coral is abundant, but as on the surface, it often has a fossilized appearance. rare sight. Giant clams paving the seabed of Masa Bareka Bay. Among the sea anemones, the clownfish play. Protected from the poisonous sting, they have nothing to fear, and taking advantage of this, they seek refuge and protection here. The visitors here are rather numerous, and their passage seems to have somewhat disturbed this trunkfish, who prefers to withdraw. Created in 1983, Ras Mohammed is the first Egyptian national park. Its existence means that today diving can be practiced here in a near-perfect environment. This region, where devastating rains are unknown, free from the pollution of factories and cities, is in fact an exceptional ecosystem. The origins of this park lie in the coral reef, which is today considered to be one of the two productive natural ecosystems in the world. The other is the tropical rainforest, which also faces conservation difficulties. Next to Yolanda and Shark Reef is an island, separated from the mainland by a mangrove forest, where these rare plants that live in salt water, nourished by their tangle of aerial roots, grow. The main inhabitants are these little crabs, who scurry backwards and forwards between the sand and the sea. The terns share their territory with the gulls, the storks, the herons and the ospreys. As night falls, it's not uncommon to come across a desert fox, for it's possible to spend the night in the park. The areas are managed in such a way as to prevent any future damage and destruction. The place is exceptional. Michael Pearson, warden of the National Park.
Ici, on est sur un récif corallien ancien.
Here we are on an ancient coral reef, about 250,000 years old. In the park, you will find fossilized coral platforms dating back 60,000 to 9 million years. It's very interesting. The coral reefs here are very beautiful. They are very productive. They have enormous biodiversity. According to a recent study, there are about 200 different types of coral.
À peu près 200 espèces de coraux différents.
The waters of the park are patrolled constantly by rangers in order to prevent a reoccurrence of the errors of the past.
On a trouvé, quand on est arrivé, qu'il y avait un champ.
We found when we arrived there had been a dramatic change in the functioning of the coral reef where people were feeding the fish. The herbivorous fish were eating the eggs. There were pieces of bread everywhere. Sometimes we were attacked by a fish that wanted something to eat.
On était attaqué par un poisson qui voulait manger quelque chose.
There is a clear destabilization of the normal system on a coral reef when the fish are fed. All the diving sites of Sinai are today protected, allowing the coral reef to sustain the thousands of organisms which coexist in this complex, interdependent, underwater world.
عندك يا البعيد تعال يا البعيد تعال ارحمني يا البعيد تعال يا البعيد تعال دمع القطر فوق غدوسي شلل يا البعيد تعال ارحمني يا البعيد تعال يا البعيد تعال.
A natural bridge between Europe, Africa and Asia since time immemorial. Already famous for its precious stones back in the time of the pharaohs, the peninsula of the Sinai extends to the east from the Suez Canal with 56,000 square kilometers of mountains and sand. To the north, the Mediterranean coast. The Bedouins come here to spend the hardest seasons of the year in the protective valleys of the immense sand dunes. El Arish, with 400,000 inhabitants, is the most important town in this part of the Sinai. Between the desert and the sea, it's become a coastal resort visited by Qareens during weekends and holidays. A road links Rafah, frontier town on the border with the Palestinian territory in Gaza, to the Suez Canal, 158 kilometers away. The principal activity in this area centers on the salt flats, where 70,000 tons of pure salt are collected every year. It's Egypt's third most important resource, after petroleum and iron ore. Tel El Farame can be seen from Port Said. Recent archaeological discoveries have found in this area remains from the 5th century AD. A town and many villages have sprung up here, with thousands of inhabitants. Along the coast, waiting ships signal the proximity of the Suez Canal. A vital key in international trade, since 1869 the canal has offered a shortcut of 9,000 kilometers in the maritime route to the east. Port Said, the door to the Mediterranean, was so named in honor of Prince Said, the Crown Prince of Egypt, who authorized the construction of the canal. At the time of its inauguration on the 17th of November 1869, Port Said had 10,000 inhabitants. Today it's a lively, cheerful town with 320,000 people and is often compared to Tangiers in the 40s. There are numerous duty-free shops in this port, designed in the style of a European city. The goods come from Cairo and Alexandria, but also from Israel. Every day cruise ships dock here to allow their passengers to shop. Port Said, maritime capital, is also home to numerous shipping companies. Near the centre, on Abd el Salem Street, is the Villa Fernanda, the former home of Ferdinand de Lesseps. he achieved his ambition to open up the world to all nations with the construction of the Suez Canal. There is intense activity on both sides of the canal. On the one side, Port Said, on the other, Port Fuad. It took 10 years of work worthy of the pharaohs to build the canal. Work began on the 25th of April 1859 and finished on the 17th of November 1869 in an atmosphere of great excitement in the presence of the Empress Eugenia, the wife of Napoleon III. An average of 50 ships pass through the canal each day. On board one of the ships, one of 270 Egyptian pilots, all experts in the science of navigation. Divided into 3 convoys, ships take 15 hours to sail the 173 kilometers of the canal. The speed of the boats is regularly checked. They must not exceed 14 kilometers per hour. The distance between the ships is also controlled. The canal is Egypt's main money earner. It makes more than $2 billion every year. On the banks of Lake Timsah, 80 kilometers from Port Said, is Ismailia, with 20,000 inhabitants. It's a charming town with thermal baths dating from the last century, flower-decked streets and pretty villas. Ferdinand de Lesseps lived here. The town takes the name of Jedive Ismail, successor to his uncle Said Pasha, governor of Egypt. In the heart of the town lies the Garden of Statues. It's a museum housing the many antiquities found when the canal was built. Fish are plentiful in the waters of the lake, and they provide one of the town's most important resources. Lake Timsah has been joined to the Nile since the time of the New Empire, when Ramses II ordered the construction of the first canal. Near the exit of the canal, ships can be seen from both the Red Sea and the town of Suez. The ships pass by this town, which was called Clysma in the 15th century. It's the only ancient city on the canal. The new town, situated on the banks of the canal, is today a lively port. It's also the site of refineries, which process oil from the Red Sea. At the entrance to the port, another convoy appears. In 15 hours, it will reach the Mediterranean. To cross from one side to the other and enter the Sinai, travelers can choose between ferries or the Ahmed Hamdi tunnel. In 5 minutes you cross from green fields and crystal waters to the sands of the desert. It's a taste of the landscapes to be seen in the heart of this region. take us to the center of the peninsula, a highway connects Suez with Eilat in Israel through Nalu. 250 kilometers of sand dunes and mountains. It's rare to see cars here. In the next few years, hectares of green fields should emerge from the desert. Experience has already been gained in areas near Suez that were cultivated some time ago. The Egyptian authorities want to attract 3 million people to the desert of the Sinai. At the moment, there are no more than 160,000 inhabitants. They plan to spend $22 million to develop the area, investing in agriculture, tourism and industry. All this should lead to the creation of about 430,000 jobs by the year 2017. The cornerstone of this project is water. The region will gradually be irrigated by 120 kilometers of canals, bringing water from the Nile. Egypt has restored peace to this region, which has been troubled since the 40s. The memorial of Tabat el-Shagra opposite Ismailia is a reminder of these times. The dunes were the center of operations of the Israeli forces on the Bar Lev front line during the War of October 1973. All this shows that with its mineral resources, the region is a land of promise. The Sinai is in fact an immense history book. This stream, for example, legend has it that the water became drinkable when Moses threw a special tree into it. Onto Uyun Musa, the spring of Moses, situated a few kilometers from Suez on the southern highway. It was here, at this oasis, that the children of Israel rested with their sheep while escaping from Pharaonic troops during the Exodus. A 100 kilometers further south are the springs of the pharaohs. It's said that kings came to swim in the warm, sulphurous waters that sprung from the mountain before going into the sea. Today it's the Bedouins who enjoy these thermal springs. Now we abandon the coastal highway of the Red Sea and travel to the heart of Gabai el-Tai, the desert zone of the Sinai. After Abu Zamina, more and more sand appears progressively among the rocks, as far as the mountains. The highway turns into a rough track on the way to Serabit el-Khadem. There are many lorries, as the region is full of chalk and manganese mines. The contrasting colors of the mountains are fascinating. These mountains have a variety of minerals and precious stones, turquoise and malachite. They have been mined for thousands of years, since the time of the pharaohs, without counting the tons of copper and other minerals which are also found in the area. Serabit el-Khadem is 5 hours from the coast in a 4-wheel drive vehicle. In this valley we begin our climb, which will take us to the summit, another 50 minutes away. Towards the 12th century, the miners constructed a temple. At first it was dedicated to the goddess Hathor, who is also known as the goddess of turquoise. But later the sanctuary was consecrated to the god of the desert, Sodpu. Dozens of offerings from the miners have been discovered in this region, where the majority of mines are situated. Some inscriptions date back to the 4th dynasty and the king Cheops, who built the Great Pyramid. At the foot of the temple, the houses that serve as home for some of the 70,000 Bedouins of the Sinai. Most no longer live a nomadic life. Instead, they make a living from their handicrafts and tourism.
كويس لما نلبس البتاعة دي ويروح يعمل لي في الافلام بيزعل البدو.
The Valley of Pillars. Only four-wheel drive vehicles can reach this place, since there are no roads, only dirt tracks. In the early hours of the morning, camels disturb your sleep. This is a special place for those who like camping in the open air and enjoy solitude. Each Bedouin tribe is independent, but the men meet often informally.
الله يفرجها بالمطر يا راجل.
جاز هذا.
اي والله تفرج. اللي يشيل الف حمله.
When the men leave their camp to go to work in the towns or to hunt, the members of the tribe regroup. Even though they're no longer nomads, the Bedouins continue to live in tents. They keep their traditions alive, among which the most celebrated is their sense of hospitality. These are the ancient nomads of the Arabian Peninsula, whose name comes from the Arabic Badawi, which means desert. They came to the Sinai 5,000 years ago, and although they became Muslims, they respected Moses. They served as guides and protectors of the Christian pilgrims on their way to St. Catherine or to the Holy Land. With the arrival of Islam, they escorted pilgrims to Mecca. The women are in charge of the domestic arrangements, the campsites and the livestock. They can walk up to 40 kilometers a day. The children look after the goats. The camels and the black goats are the mainstay of the Bedouins. The animals provide milk for food, hide for tents, and excrement for fires. On the way to the oasis of Ferran is Wadi Maktoub, a place classified as a historical site. Among recent graffiti, there are Hebrew inscriptions in the rock. These relate the military campaigns of the king Semhek, who 3,000 years BC fought with the Bedouins. Today, everything exists in a state of harmony, with colors blending into each other across the horizon. After this track, we find ourselves on another road, which the Romans built to join Africa to Asia. It crosses the oasis of Wadi Feira, the largest cultivated area in the Sinai. El Oued is an area of 4 kilometers, rich in vineyards, vegetables and orchards. This is the biblical place where the children of Israel camped before crossing the desert.
يعني مثلا ممكن تكون بنت عندها 11 سنة.
Between the 4th and 6th centuries AD, a monastery was built here which has become a place of devotion in the Sinai. The church of the monastery was rebuilt in 1970 by 2 monks from St. Catherine and consecrated to Moses. We find ourselves now at the foot of the great peaks of the peninsula, when an unexpected spectacle presents itself. At the crossroads of the routes towards the Gulf of Aqaba and the monastery of St. Catherine, in an immense isolated valley, blue rocks decorate the landscape where the colour brown normally predominates. It's of course a work of art, constructed in 1979 by Jean Verame under the government of Sadat. The work, painted soon after the Camp David peace accords, is dedicated to the glory of peace. The Bedouins have no complaints, since according to their traditions, blue is the colour which protects them from the evil eye. The road continues towards the Gulf of Aqaba and one of the most impressive oases, Ain Hudra. We come to a valley. Its green slopes serve as a signal from many kilometers away to the caravans crossing the Sinai. On this road there's a petrified tree. The beaches are at least an hour away in a 4-wheel drive. The Gulf of Aqaba. The coast is still very much unspoilt, bordered by a tortuous route. This is the kingdom of isolated coves and diving sites. To the north, the region of Taba is famous for its curiosities. The fjord, which in reality does not have the depth of its Scandinavian cousins, but which is nevertheless a surprise in this landscape. The other celebrated view is Salah ad-Din, the citadel built on the island of Pharaohs, which played an important role in the time of the Crusades. This is Elat in Israel, and Aqaba in Jordan. At a height of 2,637 meters, the mountain of St. Catherine dominates the southern point, and its 3 main towns of Sharm el-Sheik, Dahab and Nuweiba. A point of contact with Syria, Jordan and Saudi Arabia is the daily ferry, one of the few ships which can be seen on the horizon from Nuweiba. Next to this town is Tarabin. Travellers have a soft spot for this quiet beach, where the pace of life is as slow as that of a camel. And here you can find cheap accommodation in huts by the edge of the sea. For the Bedouins, this is a new opportunity. They sell fruit and vegetables they have grown themselves in the oasis. The Bedouins are always full of surprises. Abdallah is a mute fisherman who has for many years spent each day in the company of Uli the dolphin. An affectionate and genuine friendship exists between the mute fisherman and the intelligent dolphin, who found a common language. To give Uli his daily ration of squid, Abdallah has obtained special permission from the authorities. This area is a natural sea reserve with strict fishing quotas. Abdallah's brother tells us how they met. Abdallah went fishing, so he found him while he was fishing and gave him something to eat. He then came from time to time. For the past year and a half, he's come regularly.
مع الماتور راح ورا اللانش بيمشي ورا اللانش على طول.
A dozen kilometers inland, one of the colored canyons which are one of the attractions of the peninsula.
Raccomando. Aspetta me, fermo la bella.
Aspetta fra, eh?
It's a vigorous walk of between an hour and a half to 2 hours, during which the landscape offers an array of colors.
E se ti frasi di mezzo devo spostare il masso, no? No, se ti 'Calma come quando si fa le connessioni. Sì.
Esatto, bravo.
Come quando fai l'amore. Vai. Via. Dimmi, Sheik.
70 kilometers to the south lies Dahab, which means gold in Arabic. Here the mountains lie directly on the sea. Rock falls from the walls of the cliff have created a sandy plain, and many hotels have been built in this area. Enthusiasts of sailing and other water sports welcome the winds which provide a breath of fresh air to the desert. Under the hull of the ships lies the Red Sea, no doubt so called because of an algae which colours the water, unless the real reason is what the locals say. They call the surrounding desert the Red Country. Dahab is one of the areas renowned for fishing and diving. Visitors come from all over the world, not so much for the fish, but for the exceptional underwater sights, rock formations carved by geological movements. In this area, the depth of the water can reach 9 kilometers. It's an excellent environment for those who want to try their hand at scuba diving. The reward at the end is a wander around the place known as the canyon. Just to the side is one of the most fascinating places on Earth for divers, the Blue Hole. Most of the divers live in the Bedouin village, built in a sheltered bay, where their traditional and modern lifestyles combine perfectly with the environment. Bedouins owning land have found here one of the activities that has led them to abandon their nomadic existence, tourism. The owners of restaurants, hotels and even taxis are the lifeblood of this holiday resort. And in the evening, the hotels of the new town attract those seeking other pleasures.
أنا مش هسامحك لا أنا لازم أشوف الدمعة دي رجلي جوه عينيك
40 kilometers to the south of Dahab, a track leads to the perfect spot for cyclists to enjoy their sport.
Hello.
The cyclists speed along deserted roads, where there are few mountains and only the sun which forces them to make frequent stops. These cyclists are going to tour the Sinai in a week. The small fishing village of Nabka. Pollution here is almost non-existent, and the salinity of the water is exceptional. 4% compared to 3% in the Mediterranean, for example. This is why in this corner of Egypt's national park, 3 scientists are trying out an experimental fish farm. Their aim is to raise prawns in a closed environment for local clients. The islands of Tiran. These 4 small islands lie along the coast of Saudi Arabia, and the depth of the water reaches 250 meters. The numerous shipwrecks and coral reefs attract thousands of fish and delight divers and photographers. Here's the beginning of one of the world's underwater paradises. Everything is geared up for diving. The boats, villages like Shark Bay, equipment and other related activities. Narma Bay, where there's a wide range of accommodation. And for those who are tempted by diving, there are the beaches. Everyone can enjoy the underwater sights, thanks to glass-bottomed boats that cross the bay. For the divers, the journey begins at 9 in the morning. We're in a national park where diving is strictly regulated. Divers almost face a race against time. Diving sites along the coast are limited, so the first ones to leave will have the pick of the best areas. On board, supervisors explain the rules to novice divers. It's forbidden to feed the fish or touch them. Another rule is that only 4 boats can anchor at the same point. Here there are 3 beautiful reefs, full of fish, full of coral. There are many things to see. There are sheltered bays where inexperienced divers can be trained, but people with more experience can go to places like Tiran and Ras Mohammed.
Où des gens sans beaucoup d'expérience et aussi les gens qui ont plus d'expérience peuvent aller aux d'autres endroits comme Tiran ou Ras Mohammed.
It's one of, if not the most beautiful place in the world. A quarter of the fish seen while diving exist only here. It's a permanent show and the clarity of the water is exceptional. The average day for a beginner consists of an hour and a half on the boat and 2 hours of diving, broken up by time to rest and enjoy the scenery.
Si tratta della planaria.
Past the lighthouse of Ras Sid is Sharm el-Sheikh with its beautiful coves. The elegant residential areas are on the mountainside of the city, which was for a long time the only town in the Sinai. It's essentially an administrative and commercial center. Every evening the diving boats return to its port. From here there are regular boats to Hurghada on the other side of the Red Sea, which leave under the watchful eye of a rock resembling Kennedy. Ras Mohammed, or the Head of Mohammed, is situated at the other end of the Sinai Peninsula. It's the best place to look over the Red Sea, with the water reaching a depth of 3,000 meters. The temperature of the water varies between 21 and 26 degrees. This explains the variety of underwater life that exists here: fish, algae, and 150 types of coral. Moreover, fossils dating back 20 million years have been found here. Whether exploring underwater or on land, the area of Ras Mohammed is a national park and has been protected since 1983. At the entrance to the park, there's no lack of originality. Telescopes placed at strategic points allow the desert and its inhabitants to be observed. Pure clear water pours from unknown origins through a crack recently created by an earthquake. Barely a few kilometers away, the landscape changes completely. The road to St. Catherine's Monastery crosses a mountainous desert. The valleys are made of sand, but water can pour into them in a few minutes when there are the occasional torrential rains. At over 2,000 meters, the mountain takes on the color of the surrounding sand. And soon appears the site which is sacred to Jews, Muslims and Christians. God spoke to Moses from here. Through a burning bush, God told Moses that this was a sacred site and ordered him to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. In the year 337 AD, the Empress Helena, mother of Constantine, built a chapel. In the 6th century, the Emperor Giustiano had a monastery built here. The place is sacred to several religions, and there's been a mosque within the walls of the monastery since the year 1381. Through its isolation, this fortress has survived attacks, including those led by Emperor Leon III in 726, who wanted to destroy all Christian communities. A dozen monks today live in this exceptional place. From the point of view of nationalities, I'm the only Frenchman at the moment. Generally, the monastery can be described as Greek Orthodox. Though it has its roots in a Byzantine monastery, over time it's become essentially Greek. But all monasteries are open to those who want to come. There's also an English monk and a Romanian. The only requirements needed are to be of the Orthodox faith and to want to live a monastic existence. It's more than a monastery, it's a small church. It's the smallest Orthodox church in the world. For historical reasons, the abbot is a bishop who's been elected by the monks and is traditionally consecrated by the Patriarch of Jerusalem without being part of a synod. Because of that, we're independent.
Et qui est traditionnellement consacré par l'archevêque, le patriarche de Jérusalem, sans faire partie de son synode. Donc nous sommes indépendants.
In the heart of the monastery is the chapel of the burning bush. You must enter without shoes, as Moses did on orders from God. The library has 32,000 manuscripts, making it the second most important in the world after that of the Vatican. It's been closed to the public since 1844, when a researcher borrowed a 4th century Bible and forgot to return it. Only the skeletons of the archbishops are kept intact. The remains of the monks are housed in a special chamber. The only exception is the monk who guards the entrance to Mount Sinai. He asked to remain on guard even after his death in 580. The members of the congregation have respected the wishes of Brother Stephen. The jewel of the monastery. The treasure reflects the generosity of the Christians. The monks, they prefer to isolate themselves in the mountains. We have some cells outside the monastery, where monks can go and spend some time alone. The attraction of the desert is a key element in the vocation of the monks of the Sinai.
L'attraction du désert est un élément fondamental de la vocation des moines du Sinaï, ça c'est certain.
Even to the expert eye, it's difficult to make out their cells. Sometimes the monks dig underground in order to cut themselves off from the rest of the world. The area is guarded and farmed by the Bedouins of Jabalia, who also guide visitors up the surrounding mountains. They're the descendants of mercenaries brought over from Romania in the 6th century AD by Emperor Giustiano to serve and protect the monks. Today they're perfectly integrated in Islamic life and no longer worship Saint Catherine. At the exit to the monastery on the road to the town is what the Bedouins say is the place where Moses sacrificed the golden calf. President Sadat and Mitterrand often came to this residence, which is just outside the town of St. Catherine. The hotels and restaurants in this small town attract those who don't want to sleep in the monastery. In the mosque, close to the Muslim cemetery, a verse of the Quran recalls the sacred nature of this place, where God told Moses to take off his shoes. Dominating the village is the palace of Jadai Abbas. Legend says that he took refuge here when he was recovering from a contagious disease, in order to avoid infecting those around him. Leaving the monastery, there are several paths leading to Mount Sinai, which is also known as Mount Moses. It takes 3 hours of hard walking to reach the top. Believers can visit the place where God gave Moses the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments. Mountain lovers come to enjoy the climb. Others come to watch the sun rise and set from a height of 2,285 meters. The view extends from the Gulf of Suez to the Gulf of Aqaba. There are numerous chapels and retreats along the mountain paths. One path leads up more than 300 steps carved out of the rock. The Muslims say it was built by Muhammad's horse Borak when the Prophet rose to heaven. At the top is a chapel erected by Giustiano. It's been destroyed 3 times and was last rebuilt in 1934. Fatigue and the surroundings can lead one to stop to take in the view. This is where the Bedouins live. They give shelter to those who come to spend the night at the summit, so that they can watch the sunrise. A few hundred meters away as the crow flies is the highest peak in the Sinai Peninsula, the mountain of St. Catherine at a height of 2,637 meters. Legend says that an angel brought the body of the saint here after she was martyred in Alexandria by Empress Maximus, who she tried to convert. It's a 5-hour walk to the summit, from where you can see almost the entire peninsula. Since time immemorial, deserts and mountains have been places of contemplation. The Sinai is one of the few spots in the world which combines both elements. And to add a mystical touch to this historical place, the Bedouins say that the word Sinai has its roots in the word Sin, the goddess of moon, worshipped by the first inhabitants of this part of the world.